Welcome to Book Huddle. I'm your host, Karen Reader with Readgab, and I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Jessica Vitalis, author of Unsinkable Cayenne, Coyote Queen, and other amazing middle grade books. And I'm just so excited to have her on. I'm going to let Jessica take a second to introduce herself. And please also, Jessica, tell us a little bit about you besides being an author.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you talking books and a little bit about me. Let's see. I am a full-time author. I currently live in Ontario. I'm American by birth, but recently got my Canadian citizenship as well. So that's very exciting. And yeah, I'm pretty much all things, all books, all the time. But when I'm not reading or writing, I love to curl up with a good cup of hot chocolate and chat with my teenage daughters.
Oh, so fun. That's awesome. Can you give us, for those listening who have not heard of this incredible book, Unsinkable Cayenne? It is a novel in verse. Can you give us the elevator pitch? Tell us what is it about?
Sure. Unsinkable Cayenne is the story of a young girl who has spent her entire life traveling the country with her weird, embarrassing hippie parents living in the back of a van. And she wants more than anything else to settle down and have a chance at building a normal life.
Right.
And she finally gets that when their family welcomes twins, Bear and Saucity, and her parents realize that traveling in a van with twins is not sustainable.
Right.
So they settle down in the Midwest, and Cayenne thinks this is going to be her chance to live the life she's always wanted. But it turns out that staying in one place doesn't really help you build a normal life. And maybe fitting in isn't even really something she wants to achieve.
Right. Right. I loved it. I love Cayenne so much, and I love that sometimes in books, like a character is just the way a person should be, right? Like the lesson is already learned, they're behaving like they should be. But Cayenne, at first she wants to fit in, and at the expense of maybe making some choices that she kind of knows maybe she shouldn't concerning friends, right? And I love that about her, that she learns, and we get to experience this with her. And I love her battling feelings about her hippie family during like the 80s, right? It's the 80s, which is when I grew up. And so I love this that she's like, you know what? I don't love that we have chickens living in the front yard and things like that. And so yeah, tell me about how did Cayenne come into your mind, this hippie family? Tell me about creating this.
This story actually had a really interesting journey to fruition. It started during COVID, as so many stories coming out now did. I was on the phone with some critique partners and friends, and we were just talking about what's next. And we came up with the idea of writing an anthology together, or we were going to be the editors in this anthology. And the anthology actually was going to be about first kisses because there aren't a lot of middle grade books out there about sort of those early crushes and
Yes.
first kissing experiences. So we decided that we were each going to start out by writing the story of something having to do with the first kiss. And I realized that I don't remember my first kiss,
Oh,
which is a really I know, weird, right?
right.
Like that
Big moment.
feels like I should remember. And I wasn't running around kissing a lot of people. It's not like
There
there are
there
just
were
too
so
many
many
choices.
of these hundreds. I just can't keep it straight.
Yeah, there was none of that. So I just don't understand how come I don't remember this moment, but it must not have been very
It wasn't a
overwhelming.
good one.
Yeah,
It wasn't
apparently not.
significantly good or bad. Maybe that's what it
Yeah,
was.
it
Was.
flew right out. So I started thinking about, well, what could have been my first kiss? Like what there was, only a handful of potentials here. So I started thinking particular about this one occasion where I was out walking my dog, and he was a giant Saint Bernard, just like the Saint Bernard in Unsinkable Cayenne. And in fact, his name was also George, just like George
Oh,
in
that's fun.
Unsinkable. And I was out walking George, and this beautiful boy walked toward me. And it was a very small town. So I knew he was new to town. I'd never seen him before. And I immediately developed a massive crush on this boy. And he ended up having a crush on me too. He went to my school, but he moved away and I moved away. And so I know for sure he was not my first kiss because I never even built up the courage to talk to this
Okay.
boy.
Oh,
But
you didn't even
that
talk.
experience, I didn't, I was a shy, I was a lot like I am. Like I
Right.
desperately wanted to popular, but I was really embarrassed by my family. I was super shy. I didn't have the nice
Were
clothes.
they
We were
hippies?
really, they were hippies. Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
they
I
sell
always tell
bread out of
people
their van?
well, occasionally, yes.
I,
They're the
I
hippies.
love how much of this is coming from your life.
Yeah, I always tell people if you read Unsinkable Cayenne and you read Coyote Queen and blend the two together, you'll
What's
pretty
that?
much know everything about my childhood.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I love it.
Yeah, so it's very, I mean, my family was very different than Cayenne's family, but a lot of the story is very much inspired by my own experiences.
Oh wow, wow. I love that. Do you have twin siblings as well?
No siblings. I am the oldest of five, but no
No
twins.
twins. Okay. Wow, that is so fun. So then was there a van? Was there a time when your family lived in a van when you were the oldest and stuff?
We were a very transient family, so
Okay.
we moved almost 24 times before I reached fourth grade.
Oh wow. Wow.
We never lived in a van, but we did live in a school bus that we pulled all of the seats out of. We lived in a camper that we pulled behind our car. We lived in a one-room cabin with no electricity or running water. So this transient sort of lifestyle that Cayenne has is very much inspired by
You're
personal.
writing from experience. I love it. So, you know what it was like trying to get in there and make friends and be a unique individual that is not the mold in the school. And
And I think you don't have to have grown up in the 80s and you don't have to have grown up with weird hippie parents to know that longing to fit in, right? Like we all
yes,
experience that, and kids even now experience that. So even though I'm writing about some very specific childhood experiences, I think that's really a
I think
universal.
that is I think that is so real. And I love how many middle grade books out there talk about that because in the moments that we feel like as middle school, it's weird and hard. And I love those people who loved it because I did not. But like so many people like feel so alone and so many of them think they're the only one. And so to have these books and be like, yeah, I'm not the only one feeling like
Yeah.
this unique time in life, right? So I love that. So is this your first novel in verse?
My first novel in verse. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was also a really interesting development because when verse novels first started gaining popularity, not too terribly many years ago, I remember reading them and loving them and just being in awe. And I actually specifically told a critique partner I could never write a novel in
Right.
verse. I'm not a poet, which is funny because I wrote poetry as a child and in high school all the time. But as an adult, I don't identify as a poet. And so when I was writing that anthology that I was telling you about, it was just a short story and it just came out in verse. I think that felt really safe,
Oh,
right? Like I'm not
okay.
committing to a whole novel. This is
Okay.
something I can just experiment with. If my
Just
critique
dipping your
partner
toes in.
then I can throw it away and quick write another short story. So I
Okay.
wrote it in verse and they loved it. And
Nice.
my agent loved it. And then my editor actually ended up reading the submission for the anthology and she said, "Hey, we don't do anthologies, but I loved Jessica's short story." So she said if she wants to turn that into a novel, I'd be really happy to look at publishing it. So I was
Yay.
like, okay, well, apparently I now write novels in verse.
Yay. Oh, that's so fun. I love that. Did you have any experience? Did you take classes in college with poetry? What was your poetry experience prior to that?
Really, I didn't have any as ever since. I mean, taking some literature courses in high school, but even those weren't writing and certainly not
Right.
writing poetry. So, what I did when I realized that I was going to write this novel is I got my hands on pretty much every middle grade novel in verse ever published, and I read them all because
Nice.
I thought there was this secret recipe. I thought there was something that all of these authors knew about
Uh-huh.
writing in verse that I didn't know. And so I was
Right.
determined to figure out what that was. So I read all these novels in verse, and then I got on the phone with a friend of mine, Megan E. Freeman, who wrote Alone.
Yes.
Um, Brilliant novel in verse, and she's just a brilliant person. And I was kind of sharing some of my fears, and she said, "No, no, 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 no. There's no secret. The
Right.
beauty of writing in free verse is that there are no rules. You get to make up the rules."
Yes.
So once she told me that, I was really free. I didn't have to worry about whether I was doing it right or wrong. And I spent a lot of time then thinking about how best to tell Cayenne's story, not how best to write poetry or to
Yes.
impress people, right?
I
But how to
love
write
that.
a story to be told.
That's beautiful. I love hearing that. My one of my favorite phrases that you could just, if it didn't follow the rules, that's all you had to say. Writer's license, writer's
Yep.
license. I didn't follow the rules. I get to make this exception, you know.
Well, and I think that is the brilliance of studying the form. It's hard to have writer's license when you're first starting out because you
Right?
need a certain level of expertise to know how readers experience stories.
Mhm.
And then once you have that level of knowledge, then you can decide where you want to take writer's license for specific reasons rather than just doing it because you're not sure what else to do. So I think there is a nuanced difference there. But yeah, creative writer's license is really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then just this joy. I love that novels in verse have just taken the children's literary world by storm and how, you know, it's so consumable and kids who feel like, oh my gosh, this book just looks so long. And then to feel like, but I open the pages and look how fast I can get through it because there's only so many words per page and it feels so much more consumable that they can experience it in a way that maybe the reluctant reader or, you know, somebody who feels overwhelmed wouldn't otherwise be reading these wonderful stories.
Yeah, and especially for I have a daughter with a learning disability and she has dyslexia, and so
Uh-huh.
books, novels can be really challenging for her, and so novels in verse are just a really wonderful way to make beautiful stories accessible. So I love that.
Love it. All right, so let's go back to talking more about the friendships. Can you tell me about developing friendships in books and how you go about that?
Sure. Well, for me, it's always really important that the friendships come across as realistic and believable because as you pointed out earlier, middle school is not easy. And there's no such thing as an easy middle school friendship. You're changing, you're growing, you're navigating all sorts of really complicated dynamics. And no matter how good of friends you are, you're still going to sort of bump into problem areas as you're figuring out who you're going to be and whether you're going to grow together. So it's all those sorts of things that I try to weave into the stories. And this was particularly true for Cayenne. So in this story, she has two friends. There's Dawn, who is sort of one of the quote unquote rich girls in town in the sense that her family has plenty of money. But she's not necessarily one of the popular girls. She's kind of a strange kid or perceived as strange. She loves to read and she dresses like the characters in her stories. And she
She
opens her heart.
seems very content with what she is, right? She's just happy in her skin and stuff.
Exactly. She's
Yeah.
not striving to, achieve some sort of middle school popularity. And so she is sort of Cayenne's comfort. I wanted Cayenne to have somebody that would offer sort of a hand to help guide her in this journey, even if she doesn't always know how to accept that help, or even if she wants to accept that help.
Right, right. Because at first she's kind of hesitant, like, I guess I sit by her.
Yeah.
Great.
I know I should find friends, and this is kind of my only option at this point. So she starts out with not the purest of intentions.
Yes.
Um, Part of her growth, right? Like
Right.
sometimes as human beings, and particularly as children, we make decisions that maybe later on in life we won't be proud of, but those are real and authentic, and we have certain motivations for why we make those decisions. And for Cayenne, it's this feeling of wanting to fit in with the popular girls and wondering if I sit with Dawn, are the popular
Not
girls
gonna
going?
ruin it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that was Dawn. And then we had Tiff, who is, she kind of lives right around the corner from Cayenne, but just enough far away that she lives also in what Cayenne would consider the rich part of town. Her
Right.
family is very well off. And Tiff has her own set of issues. Even though her family has money, she too longs to be popular and to fit in. And so she and Cayenne end up spending a lot of time together, but they have this sort of fraught relationship where they're both trying to navigate the middle school environment. And that gets in the way of their friendship quite a lot.
Right, right. That you see this from both of them. They're both trying to, you know, be successful socially and how that affects their interactions with Dawn and each other. And I feel like it almost shows why some mean girls start out that way, right? Kind of with Tiff, that it's like, well, geez, she's just trying to be, you know, social herself and whether it's right or wrong isn't the question, but that's what's fueling it for her.
Yeah, and that was important to me too. I didn't want Tiff to be a mean girl just for the sake of being
Right.
mean. I wanted readers to, they might not like her, but I wanted them to at least empathize with her or have some idea where
Yeah.
she's.
Right, right. I think of the ballad of, I always forget whether it's songbirds and snakes or snakes and songbirds. How Snow became the evil that he is. I would love to have this discussion with preteens and teenagers of what causes somebody to make these things. And then, it's one thing to talk about a villain in a dystopian society, but then to use a book like Unsinkable Cayenne and be like, okay, but what about this girl, Tiff? What fueled her and changes her to end up becoming, is she heading towards being one of those mean girls? Could you ever see yourself, becoming like that? We would all hope not, but then what could fuel somebody to do that? I
Oh, I
really,
love the idea of book club discussion, right? And that's the power of books. Like it
yeah,
gives us the opportunity to talk about all of this really good, meaty stuff with kids without them having to experience it
without them being
for it
like
themselves.
awkward, like, why are you asking me that? Like, I don't, yes, when we're using fictional characters, I love it. I love it so much. So, Jessica, can you tell me what else you're working on now?
I actually have
Or
several
what's
things.
coming next? Because I guess what's coming next, you're not working on it anymore, right? As there's something already finished that's about to be published.
So I actually had 4 books come out in the last 4 years, which was a lot. It was
Yeah.
very, very exciting, but I found myself over the last year or so feeling really overwhelmed and needing a bit of a break from
Okay.
um, that fast of a pace. So I haven't even turned anything into my agent yet. I have 2
Okay.
middle grades that are almost complete, and I have actually a YA that I'm working on that's almost complete. But
Um,
I'm giving myself just a few more months just to slow down the pace just a little bit, sort of slow my roll, and be able to really enjoy this publishing journey. So I don't have any books coming out in 2025. I'm focused on really marketing the books that I have, making sure they reach my readers, and then slowly I will start to hopefully, put some more
get these
material.
ones that you're working on. Okay, do you know what? I like that you have 3 that you're working on right now, because often people say to me, how can you read multiple books at once? And I'm like, well, part of it, I try to do different genres or different types of storylines so that I don't confuse the characters in my head. And I think I'm ADHD undiagnosed, but I just have this need that even if it's a really good book, I just need to go eventually jump to something else and go back and forth. So that's neat to hear about a writer doing that as well. Tell me about that experience of working on multiple books at once.
Yeah, well, that is very much not typical for me. Usually I am a one book at a time kind of gal, but
Okay.
I had this middle grade fantasy that I was working on, not really working on it, but thinking about it, mulling it over in my head for a
Mhm.
number of years. And I finally realized that it actually needed to be a YA fantasy. So I
Okay.
started working on that a little bit, but then I had all these books under contract and I was feeling like some pressure to put out another middle grade book. So I
Right.
started working on a story I really loved, but around that time, I was writing Unsinkable Cayenne or maybe doing the edits for it, and I had fallen in love with verse novels.
Mm.
And an idea for another verse novel came into my head, and I was like, I have to drop everything and write this verse novel.
Right.
So, so I ended up unintentionally working on 3 separate projects that now that I have 3 that are mostly done, I haven't been like rotating those. I have definitely focused on the YA. I'm trying to get that out, and then I will pick up one of the 2 middle grades and stick to one book at a time. Because unlike you, my brain does not like to do
Does
that.
not
Like
like to
I
jump
have
around.
trouble switching back and forth, and I really want to immerse myself into the character story world and not think about anything else while I'm
Oh,
in that.
okay, okay. So this is a unique situation. You don't want to keep going there.
I prefer never to do this again. I'm sure I'll end up in this situation again, but
Right.
yeah.
Well, because you got these ideas coming, right? And you got to write them down before you lose them, or else they'll be gone. So,
Exactly.
yeah, right. Well, that is so neat to, I don't know, hear about, about the workings, the inner workings of the author. Because I was going to ask if there will be more novels in verse. So, one of those is a novel in verse, then. That is so fun.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, Jessica, what is something that you hope that the readers take away from Unsinkable by Can? I know we've kind of talked about a couple themes already, but is there any overarching thing that you really hope that a reader will take away from it?
Yeah, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is the Titanic aspect of Unsinkable Cayenne.
Do you know what? I
So
forgot about that. Okay, great, great.
yeah. So the story is set in 1985. The reason it's set in 1985 is because I needed a historical anchor for the story. And that coincides with the discovery of the Titanic wreckage, which had been missing for 73 years. And so Cayenne's teacher is really obsessed with the wreckage, and she ends up learning a lot about the passengers and the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. And the reason all of that is so important is because the circumstances on board the Titanic, the sort of social strata, the social dynamics on the Titanic very much mirror what Cayenne is experiencing in her own life. The first class passengers have these very wealthy, extravagant lifestyles. The third class passengers are kept in a different part of the ship. They are fed very simply. They have to share these very tiny rooms. And they don't just live differently, they also died very, very differently because the vast majority of the first class passengers survived, and the vast majority of the third class passengers died when the Titanic sank. So for me, that really provided a window for us to sort of look into social dynamics, socioeconomics, and really it gave Cayenne a vehicle to explore why she felt like she wasn't worthy of being popular, wasn't worthy of her crutch in the story, all because her family doesn't have a lot of money. So if there's a takeaway from the story, I hope it's, giving readers the opportunity to think about how and why we assign worth to human lives.
I love that. And I can't believe I forgot about it. It's been a couple months, so I can't believe I forgot about that. And I love that that was a conscious parallel and that it is there. And yeah, I do remember she goes and she has to pick somebody, right, to learn about. I love that really helped her develop as a person because history is big in my family. And so to have history help us in our development, that's wonderful. All right, Jessica, at the end of all my interviews, I just love to hear what is one of your favorite children's books?
It's always so hard to pick a favorite book. I feel like my favorite is constantly changing.
Yes, that's why I have to say A. What is A
Okay,
favorite?
I'll do one that I read recently that is a newish favorite. Mid-Air by Alicia D. Williams
I've
is,
heard of it, but I haven't read it.
I'll show you the cover. I know listeners probably can't see that, but
Okay, all right.
by Alicia D. Williams is this beautiful verse novel that is about death and grief, but it's not just about grief. It's about becoming the person that you want to be. And the verse is just, it really supports the story in a really, really wonderful way. And the story is so compelling that you're just immediately pulled in and want to read right through to the end. So, highly recommend Mid-Air by Alicia D. Williams.
I love that. And I think so much of middle grade is that. Most readers are at this point of discovering themselves. And then as adults, it's never too late to say who we want to be and to kind of change that and to say, it's just because I'm 40 something years old doesn't mean that I am set in stone who I am. Who do I want to be and do I want to change that? That even reading that's neat. I will definitely add that to my to be read list.
Awesome.
Cool, cool. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for taking the time to get on and talk with us about Unsinkable Cayenne. I will include in the description how you can find Jessica and her other books, like, let's see, Coyote Queen. There's a rabbit one. What's the rabbit one called?
Gift.
The Rabbit's Gift. Is that what you said?
Rabbit's Gift and the Wolf's Curse.
The Wolf's Curse. All right. Well, we'll include the links below, and of course, also the link to where you can get Midair. And just thank you so much for taking the time to write these amazing books for kids.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.